Hello everyone, please can someone confirm if I'm audible in the chat? A very good evening to all of you. On behalf of ECEL, welcome to the speaker session on the burden of plastic pollution with our very dynamic guest, Ms. Wilma Rodrigues. Also joining us is her colleague, Mr. Arun Murugesh. I'm Anokhi Mehta, Events Coordinator at ECEL IIT Bombay and a student in the Department of Environmental Engineering. I'm really excited to introduce you all to someone whose work truly inspires me, Ms. Wilma Rodrigues. Ms. Wilma is the founder and CEO of Saahas Zero Waste, a social enterprise committed to implementing holistic zero waste solutions across India. This registered MSME believes that in the 21st century, businesses must not just talk but deliver on environmental and social impact. Ms. Wilma moved to Bangalore from Mumbai in 1995. She is a former journalist with the Times of India Group and the Business World magazine. She first set up the NGO Saahas in 2001 and then a business model, Saahas Zero Waste, in 2013. The company together brings together nature, people, and technology so that waste is managed in a manner where up to 96% of resources are recovered. Waste management through resource recovery results in environmental and social impact. Saahas Zero Waste today manages around 100 tons of waste per day. Good evening, ma'am. We're really glad to have you. Would you like to share something with the audience before we begin?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And very nice to be speaking to you today. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah, my apologies for this network issues, but let's make the best of this. The fact is that I'm happy that we're talking today about the burden of plastic pollution, because really this is a burden which is a joint burden of all of us together, whilst the burden seems to really be visible in the environment. Now each of us have to take responsibility for this. Each of us have to look at the next steps and see how we can actually address this problem together and collectively. So I'm happy to be in this session. And I also have my senior colleague Arun, who's been working quite a few years now on this whole problem. So we are happy together to share with you what do you think should be the solutions. So let's start with a little bit of a video which actually takes us through the problem right from the start and gets us to understand at every point what is the problem and how can we get into the solution mode. So Anokhi, if you can please play the video, which is just 4 minutes, I think, very short.
Yes, ma'am, we'll do that.
You've probably heard about a giant trash island in the ocean. Or that poor sea turtle and the straw. Maybe you've even heard how plastic is being found inside the fish we eat. The plastic crisis gets a lot of attention, but the headlines usually focus on the plastic that ends up in the environment. And that's just part of the story. The truth is, plastic has a whole life cycle that's hidden from view, one that harms people and the planet from start to finish. Let's start at the beginning. Plastic is made from fossil fuels like oil or fracked natural gas. Extracting those fossil fuels and turning them into plastics creates a lot of pollution. Pollution that most often affects marginalized communities nearby. As we've gotten better about using less oil and gas to power our lives, the fossil fuel industry found a lifeline in plastics. In fact, oil and gas companies are doubling down on plastic production, with plans to build or expand over 300 petrochemical plants in the US alone by 2025. But these companies already produce more plastic than we can use. So where's all that plastic going? A lot of it's flowing into new markets, in places like Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Because more than any other product category, plastic isn't driven by the demand for it, but by the supply. Corporations like Unilever, Nestle, and Procter & Gamble are aggressively marketing single-use plastic products around the world. These companies go to places like Indonesia, where I live, and push their products onto communities that just aren't prepared to deal with all that plastic. Maybe they're used to using natural packaging. Maybe they live on a tiny island without a system of waste collection. And on top of that, countries in the global north are shipping their own plastic waste into these countries too. When you add that all up, it's no wonder so much of this plastic ends up in the environment. And globally, that's where a whopping 32% of plastic packaging ends up. 40% goes to a landfill, where plastic just piles up for future generations to deal with. And 14% is incinerated. Incineration is a nasty business, producing toxic smoke and fly ash. These super expensive facilities depend on plastic to burn everything else. It is oil and gas after all. So they want to see more plastic, not less. Then there's recycling. Unfortunately, it's not the solution that many people think it is. Just 14% of plastic packaging gets recycled, and only 2% is effectively recycled, meaning it becomes something as useful as before. The rest is downcycled into something worse. And most recycled plastic is only recycled once, before ending up in landfills, incinerators, or the environment anyway. So it turns out that we can't burn, bury, or recycle our way out of this problem. And we can't just scoop all that plastic out of the environment either. That's like trying to bail out a bathtub with a teaspoon while the tap is on full blast. So how about we turn off the tap by shutting down the plastic machine? That means passing policies that create systemic change. Like phasing out the single-use plastics that pollute the most. Ending the fossil fuel subsidies that are fueling big plastic. And holding companies responsible for the plastic waste they create. That's how we can achieve our vision of a zero-waste future, where all of our products and packaging can be reused or repaired, effectively recycled or composted, and ultimately how we create a sustainable, circular economy that works for both people and the planet. Visit storyofplastic.org to learn more and take action.
That was a very informative video, ma'am. And I have a lot of questions to ask you about this. But before we do that, I'm really curious to know what motivated you to work in the waste management sector. What was the defining moment?
Anoki, we can't hear you.
Am I audible now? Hello? Am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you, Noki.
Ma'am, can you hear me? Ma'am, am I audible to you?
Hello?
Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me now?
Okay, there seems to be some glitch. Once the video was stopped, we couldn't hear Wilma.
Okay, so till we wait for ma'am to join the room again, so why don't you tell me about what inspired you to get into the plastic recycling and waste management sector? What was the defining moment for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So myself, I've been okay. Wilma has just joined. Let's just try this. Yeah, Wilma, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, and I think we just lost each other for a little while. Yeah, so Anokhi, should we take this forward?
Yes, ma'am. I was, before you got disconnected, I was saying that the video is really informative, and I have a lot of questions to ask you about it. But before that, I'm really curious to know what motivated you to work in the plastic and waste management sector, and what was the defining moment for you, and sir as well.
Yeah, thank you. See, the fact is that when in the early 2000 and, or rather even in the late 90s, I remember specifically standing in supermarkets, lining up, to get your groceries, and everything came packed with plastic. And at that time, it was not just everything packed in plastic, but also the plastic carry bags that were used so extensively. Uh, at that time, you had plastic, you had people or the industry telling us that, look, India generates, or rather is using such a small fraction of plastic compared to the rest of the world. I remember the number at that time was 2.5 kgs per annum per capita, whereas the US and all the other countries have tremendous volumes of plastic being used. It was even in this time, in the early part of the century, a very disturbing kind of situation, very disturbing visuals that I saw happening. And this was where decided to set up the NGO Saahas at that time. Our first campaign was less plastic for me. But then we also realized that we needed to address collection, we needed to address the solutions of recycling. And that's why over a period of time, we transitioned from the NGO Saahas to a private limited. And that's where we are today. So Arun, if you can just pull out the graphic and the slide on consumption as it is today. Because when you look at what we have today, and I remember clearly the figure of 2.5 kgs per annum per capita in 2001. And what we have today, India generating 11 kgs per annum per capita. And the US far, far higher than this. Now, the narrative in all of these years has been plastic does not litter, people do. Of course, it's a problem also of us as consumers using and not behaving responsibly. But it's also the responsibility of industry. We've seen in the video the quantum of volumes of plastic that have come into the environment. And what we see is industry not really investing adequately in infrastructure for take back, for recycling, and even not working adequately to inform consumers about what they need to do. I mean, have we seen whilst we've seen advertisements talk about buy and purchase and different brands, etc., have you seen a single brand really tell us as consumers how we have to act responsibly? All we see is a little, recyclable kind of logo hidden somewhere at the back of every package. So really, this is something that industry today needs to be pushed, needs to take responsibility along with the rest of us. And when we come to, Arun, if you can pull out the slide again about the kind of recycling that has happened. We've been told consistently over the last, the next slide, please, next one. Yeah, this one. We've been told consistently that we can use and consume because plastic can be recycled. And from 1950 to the 2020s, we've seen across all these years, just about less than 10% of plastic has actually been recycled. The rest of it has just gone into the environment. A lot of it has been burnt, and that's where the situation is. Now, I'd like Arun at this point to tell us where the problem of recycling is and what is the actual situation around recycling. Recycling is not as easy as it has been made out to be. It is a very intensive process. If you look at the kinds of plastic that we have, if you look at the kinds of requirements, I mean, it's not something that you can just recycle. There's a collection system which has to be first introduced and intensively operated. And then you have every different type of plastic needing different types of recycling. And in India, not just in India, but the rest of the world, we don't have the adequate technologies or the adequate infrastructure to recycle. And that's why we have this dismal number of just 9% of plastic since 1950 having been recycled. Arun, can you please step in here to give us some insights into the kinds of recycling that is happening?
Sir, we can't hear you. Maybe you've not unmuted yourself.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Wilma. Thanks for the background. So it's definitely a myth about recycling. To be very honest, I really hope that we can rephrase recycling to call it downcycling, because there's only two things. There isn't something called recycling. There's one called downcycling, and there's something called as upcycling. We'll talk about upcycling slightly in a bit. But if you notice here, even in this chart, the recycle component which actually comes back into the system is very, very minuscule, even globally. The biggest problem here is, corporate have actually found a way to create the triangle and with 3 arrows in there, making it look like it's coming back into the system, the recycling symbol. But generally speaking, it doesn't come back into the ecosystem. And there are many challenges to this aspect, right? And we can just probably look at, sorry, I'm just skipping slides here. So this will define the real problem around plastic, okay? So if you look at the biggest issue right now, 37% of plastic value in the ecosystem, right? So plastic is being put out, like you saw in the video. It's being lost because it doesn't get collected in the first place. So let's not talk about recycling for a minute. Let's first talk about what happens to the plastic after a consumer has used it. It just goes to landfill, the oceans, etc. So 37% is a big number. And okay, let's now start talking about the rest of it. 24% of the material value is lost because of a design problem, right? Plastic can last for as long as 500 years. But currently, it's staggering to know that more than 50% of the plastic is designed for single use. And when single-use plastic comes into place, it's very difficult to recycle it because by nature, they are non-recyclable. So straight away, another 24% goes away. Finally, 13% of the material value is lost because of lack of open loop recycling. I mean, closed loop recycling, right? This closed loop recycling is nothing but making a bottle from a bottle, making maybe a toothbrush from a toothbrush, right? A product from a product. And that kind of technology is very few and far apart. Huge gap in infrastructure right now to be able to manage proper recycling in the form of closed loop recycling. So these are the 3 biggest challenges, and only 27% of the plastic is expected to be recovered as well going forward. But these are challenges that we're talking about. Where there are challenges, there are opportunities. And you can see that this industry has expectations to grow as big as the Indian pharmaceutical industry. And we know how big the pharmaceutical industry is in India. So that's the myth. And these are the problem statements for us to consider. And that is where, organization like ourselves, Saahas Zero Waste, we're doing the difficult part, which is collection and sorting the plastic, understanding what form of raw material has to be supplied to the recycling industry so that they will be able to recover the value out of the plastic and keep it into the system.
Yes, sir. We have an interesting question in the chat. So Aditya is asking that what, in terms of fresher data, maybe since 2010, what is the percentage of plastic that has been recycled? And has it increased since 2010, or are we stuck at the same numbers?
So it is increasing. 13% of it is, I think it's 9%. 9 to 12% is the actual number, but there isn't a very accurate number there. Is what is getting recycled. It is improving, to be very honest. There's a bit of investments coming into the space, but the gap is very, very huge. And the gap is because of multiple reasons, right? Like we saw, design is a problem. So if people don't start designing design for recycling, as I call it, it's not going to be solving the problem. And then you need to identify the plastic and be able to collect it and sort it and then give it to the recycling industry. So there are three aspects here. I'll repeat. One is the design of the packaging or the plastic products. Second is the design and implementation of the infrastructure for supply chains. And the third is the infrastructure for recycling.
Yeah, and if I may just add to Arun, if you can go to that slide where we are seeing all the different types of plastic. And if we see, go to the next slide, please. Here. So if you see in India, so far, in the last maybe 10 years, you have a lot of focus just on formal recycling of PET, which is your bottles, or your water bottles, essentially. But you see very little real infrastructure or investment go into the other types of plastic. HDP, which is a rigid plastic where all your shampoos, etc., are made from HDP. PP, LDP, all of these plastics have, in the last few years, been largely recycled by the informal sector. And they've been recycled not in the best of processes. But currently now, we do have changes taking place, and slowly you have recycling taking place of these materials as well, of this plastic as well, in the formal sector. And the other way in which large of our packaging waste, especially the flexible plastic, which is your lace packets, which is what we call multi-layered laminate. Now, these plastics are not recyclable, or the recycling is still not very well established. So these types of plastic is going into what we call co-processing. And this is where the cement kilns, etc., are accepting this plastic as an alternative fuel. But this is a large quantum of plastic which we want really to bring into proper recycling, because we want to reduce the quantities of virgin material going into making a plastic. We need to, whatever materials are already available in the system must be used again and again, rather than bringing fresh resources or fresh virgin material.
Thank you, ma'am. So how does the future of the recycling sector look to you? I think there's a network issue and ma'am is in the room. She'll be joining shortly.
Yeah, she has joined just now. So I can take this.
I'm back.
Yes.
Yeah. Arun, you can take.
Yeah, sure. So to be very honest, this space is full of opportunities. To be very honest, we have seen a tremendous change over the past 6 months or so, where the value realization of good quality plastic raw material has suddenly shot up. The value has shot up by almost 2x sometimes. And the number of formal players in this industry as well has started to increase. Like I said earlier, the gap is very huge. But currently, there have been some investments coming in as well. A lot of entrepreneurship, visibility as well has happened in this space. So for the likes of, our partners, Manjushri and Banyan Nation, they have started initiatives around closed loop recycling, where, they are tying up with large corporates to be able to bring in what's called PCR, post-consumer recycle it in their packaging as well. Now, these are very well aligned with their sustainability, goals. So they have given their sustainability commitments by the year 2030 to achieve very good targets, to be honest. The infrastructure is hugely lacking, but then there is a demand, right? There is a demand for these kind of materials, and that demand, and there's a huge gap in the supply demand as well. The supply is not so high. So this brings out a huge opportunity for business models in this space, right? And the government policies are also coming up quite strongly. There is a policy called as extended producer's responsibility, where the producer, a brand, will have to enable bringing back the the packaging into a recycling supply chain, or into, diverting it from landfill. So policy is supporting, space is opening up with investments, space is opening up with entrepreneurs, and like I said, there is a big supply demand gap. So it's looking promising going forward, but there's a huge opportunity though.
Thank you, sir. So as you were speaking about government policy, so what kind of regulations have been introduced to promote the redesigning of plastic and promote recycling and downcycling?
Yeah, so so it's not gone to that level of upcycling or downcycling or design, to be very honest. There are industry collaborations happening. I have seen visibility of brands being wanting to come up with these kind of solutions with good design, etc. Very simple designs. For instance, there was a brand recently where they got rid of the label on their water bottles and just had it embossed on the plastic bottles itself, which straight away brought down the quantity of non-recyclable packaging in that particular bottle. So there are simple initiatives, but very important initiatives, innovations that's coming up from the brands. It's coming up slowly, but not again to that level that we expect. Having said that, there is definitely a push from the government in the aspect of waste management specifically. There is a lot of push from the government around plastic recently through the plastic waste management rules as well. And this is really heating up now because the Central Pollution Control Board has taken it up very seriously. Something that was not seen in the industry has recently happened, where certain brands were penalized for more than 50 crores. I know that's a very small amount for the brands, but still, it's a step in the right direction. So the government has started penalizing brands. The government has started tightening the screws in terms of implementation of the policies. Policies have always been there. Frameworks around policies has always been there. It's just about the implementation, which has always been a challenge. We've seen a lot of traction over the past 1 year. Around plastics, we've seen good traction starting 3 years back. And we expect this coming year as well, for a lot of clarity in this space through a new framework around plastic waste management and extended producers' responsibility specifically.
Aditya has another question. What do you think is a more likely and plausible solution, moving away from plastics or redesigning them?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very, very important question. And the fact that, sensitization of that aspect is growing is brilliant, So there are the hierarchy around waste management of reduce, reuse, and then recycle. It's a mantra which we all should follow. Wherever possible, reduce. Wherever possible, reuse. And then we can start thinking about recycling. So to be very honest, the solution is in our hands, right? So as much as possible, everyone in this ecosystem, all stakeholders, and I'm talking about R&D teams of large brands, we're talking about waste management agencies like ourselves, private limited companies, etc. We're talking about also the informal sector. So we are very firm believers of inclusion of the informal sector as well. And finally, the other stakeholder, which is the recycling end destinations, the authorized recyclers, if I can call it. Everyone should come on board with the same methodology of reduce, reuse, recycle. And that's going to be quite critical going forward as well. I think Anokhi has just dropped out. Wilma, should we take the next few slides as well, Wilma?
Sure. So she's joined back, Arun.
Yeah.
And at this point, if there are questions, but Anokhi, I think you have your next question.
Yes, ma'am. I have a question. So Saahas Zero Waste is one of the very few social enterprises in this sector. So what is the importance of having more business solutions and more social enterprises which have scalable and viable business models to have a greater impact on the society and provide a better solution to the problem?
Yeah, sure. So Anokhi, the fact is that at this point, we see the need for companies who are, really looking at addressing social, really addressing the problem, and at the same time having good focus on environmental and social impact. Now, when we say environmental impact, we need enough of resources to go into collection of the plastic, because if you can see the way the plastic is spread across, in cities, in towns, in smaller villages, and there is a very intense operations to bring back a reversal system. Now, currently what happens, because we don't have these kind of resources available, very often our municipal corporations, our small village panchayats who don't have the solution for it, they would rather just find the easier way out in terms of dumping it in the ocean, in terms of burning it, because it does cost monies to have a reverse logistics system. So whilst on one hand we have a regulation, we have laws which prevent dumping, on the other hand, the implementation of these regulations are not followed through. And that's the reason why we, have violation of regulations taking place and dumping and burning taking place. Now, on the one hand, you have large companies producing all of this packaging, saying and giving us to believe that this material can be recycled and therefore it will come back. On the other hand, you have gaps in the municipal corporations, in the collection systems. Now, both government as well as industry needs to give a push to organizations like us who have developed systems for take back. There is also a large informal sector that is working in, across India, but they work on their own. They work diligently, but they work with very difficult circumstances. You know that currently the systems, in terms of them actually getting revenues for this material is very difficult. We work with no actual operational revenues that come to the system. And this working. So I'm saying that right now we really need to see organizations like us working with the informal sector and supporting government and industry to create a reverse logistics system and proper recycling.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Forum has a question related to this. How much easier will it make? How easier it will be for the supply chain and segregation for recycling if there's a law in place to color code all the plastic that is manufactured?
So currently, color coding, the numbers on each plastic are there, but it is very, very difficult. So right now we really need, and maybe Arun can take you through some of the requirements of packaging FMCG companies to streamline packaging. Right now, because they want to attract consumers, they want to make their packaging attractive in terms of the visual the recycling part. For our audience, if you told them how difficult it is to actually make materials ready for recycling, the different kinds of plastic that is there in a single bottle, maybe you could take us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good question. And I think this particular slide is not very clearly visible because the video is probably overlaying. But yeah, so in answer to that question, this particular slide leads very well to the discussion. So if you look over here, there are 7 grades of plastic, and most of you will be aware of that by now. So there's grade 1 to 7. Now, if you look at it, grade 1 is your PET and grade 2 is your HDP. This is the more commonly known material because you've seen it in the bottle form at home. So anything in your house is more or less PET or HDP. Sometimes it's PP as well. Now, I'll just show you here. So if you notice these at the bottom, right? So you've got a tick on PET, a tick on HDP, but then there is a question mark on everything else, and there is a cross on the others. This basically says that though these bottles come with these recycling numbers, most of them can't be recycled, right? And to be very honest, it's very, very difficult to identify between these 7 categories. I'll explain. We've been in this industry for a while now, and we didn't realize that one of the very top brands in India, they have been packaging a product in a milky white bottle, which is more or less PET 99% of the time. But this one time it came in PET, and this caused a lot of problems with our operations, where it got the entire truck. There was a situation that it could have got rejected because that bottle got mixed with the PP containers. So what I'm trying to say here is color coding is going to be very difficult for us to be able to identify between the different categories of plastic. For instance, white HDP and white PP, only a very skilled person will be able to identify. And that's only by touch and feel, etc. We have developed some technologies where machine learning can be utilized with artificial intelligence coupled with robotics to be able to identify it. So I'll come back to the fundamental solution to this problem, right? What if all the bottles of HDP came in one color? Possible for the designers to come up with that solution. If that's so, then all the bottles can go into one batch, right? Even let's take PET for that matter. So all your carbonated drinks, your water bottles, all these will come in PET. 99% of them will come in PET grade. They come in 3 to 4 different shades. I think around 90% of it will come in white, which is your natural transparent colors, which will go into one category of recycling. But then you have your Sprite bottles, which will come in the green color, which cannot be mixed with the white, with the natural bottles, with the white bottles, and they will go in separate stream. Then you have a different set of streams. Maybe 5% of your PET bottles will be orange, or even your cough syrup bottles will be brown, etc. So that goes in a separate stream. So recently there was a move. Has now stopped utilizing green bottles. They've switched to white bottles. That's very positive. But then PET is your easiest plastic stream. I can solve it with PET, but then when you look at something like PP, which is probably 40% of your plastic comes in PP, you have different categories of different shades of colors and different different quality of PP as well there. So there's a lot of standardization that's required. But there is no one solution which says just change the color and you'll solve the problem. There needs to be a lot of collaboration amongst the industry, needs to be collaboration between the R&D teams of the packaging and also the recycling, right? So you can just see some of these numbers here. For instance, the pie chart shows your volumes in terms of percentages. It's a big it's a big variation from one to the other. And the biggest problem right now, I just wanted to add as well, is grade number 7. So anything that's not a pure form of grade will just be mixed in grade 7. And that's the biggest problem with plastic right now, because we don't know which category it can go into. Sometimes it's not even marked on there. Sometimes it's just a recycling triangle, or sometimes even that isn't indicated by large brands. So grade 7 is what we need to watch out in terms of design. Move away from grade 7, move into the other grades, and standardize within the other grades. So that kind of a methodology will work.
Thank you, sir. So in one of your TED Talks, Wilma ma'am, you spoke about the importance of all stakeholders, including consumers, taking responsibility for our own waste. I feel that our generation recognizes that, but we are yet to bridge the gap between awareness and action. So what role could we play as an individual in eliminating the burden of plastic pollution?
Yes, so I really believe, you see, my generation, and I keep on referring to the fact that, I was born in the 60s, and in the last 60 years, my generation has contributed a lot to where we are currently. Now we need the next generation. We need your generation, Arun's generation, and a lot of the audience here to start making sure that regulations are not just there in paper. So you, for instance, I also was talking to some of you earlier, and I talked about your own institution, the IIT. there is nothing stopping all the IITs, IIMs, or all the premium institutions from actually just not having any kind of single-use plastic on campus. Yeah? There is nothing to stop each one of us as individuals taking that effort to carry our own, whether it is cutlery, whether it is the mugs, the glasses, etc. It is an effort, but that effort is going to bring us cleaner air, water, will definitely reduce the quantum of plastic. So there is no running away from the effort and the inconvenience of changing our lifestyles so that we can be more sensitive to the environment. And I would really like that the IT cell or your particular group that you have here engage with the decision makers of your institution and then make sure that this is part of the policy so that we can also see larger change take place. Individual changes that we make, and the second would be to escalate or to enhance that change so that there are policy changes in institutions like the IITs. And finally, of course, industry. Industry needs to get that message through that they need to do much, much more than what they are doing currently. So how do we get that message through? We are all consumers. Yeah, and so therefore we as consumers now must be able to find ways in which this message goes to all the large, not just the multinationals, but also to the Indian companies. The regulation around extended producer responsibility has been in India now for the last almost 7 years. And only last year we had a few companies who got kind of wrapped because they were not following the legislation. Why? Why does it take 7 years, for us to actually call out non-compliance? And why do the large brands need this kind of, nudge, push, all kinds of requirements for them to comply with the regulation? Yeah? So we need, it has to be that the generation that's going to now really bear the brunt of all of this makes us wake up and start for the things that need to be done.
Yes, ma'am, we need to be more proactive, and entire organizations working together will definitely have a much bigger impact. At IIT Bombay, we do focus on catering to plastic waste. So our administration has come up with strict regulations on waste management. And even every hostel mess has a student council who caters to plastic waste specifically. And other than the administration, we have our own student-run bodies, Zero Waste and NSS. Zero Waste's primary focus is on waste management and reducing it both inside and outside the campus. Abhyuday, our social body, has organized a cleaning drive at Versova Beach, where students of IIT Bombay took part in the beach clean. Additionally, since we have Powai Lake close to our campus, we motivated the residents of Powai to come and clean the lake along with us, so that everyone got more motivated to work towards this. And we have also been trying to contribute in terms of research. And IIT Bombay has developed a plastic like Pharma for the packaging industry. And this can degrade into harmless components. So we really wanted to know from you what more can we do to correct the situation, especially in coming up with new and innovative solutions.
Yeah, so one of the things that you need to look at is in your waste management systems in your campus, you need to follow where the waste is going. It's not enough for you to segregate the waste and say that is, where that's our responsibility. You need to ask and you need to follow the waste to make sure that it is going into the proper end destination, and that the people who are collecting the waste, that system is also formal. It cannot be that people collecting or working to clean your campuses are not, they don't have access to, say, minimum wages or to the other social benefits. So there has to be a formal process end to end. End destinations are very important. So I would like to see this happen with the audience and all the other institutions that are also there. The second thing is that really there is no easy solutions. So when you're talking today about, say, biodegradable plastic, it still is a one-time use and throw item. There is tremendous resources, whether it is, you're growing materials, food materials are being diverted into biodegradable plastic. Water, will go extensive. Water will be used to make your biodegradable materials. The best so move away from anything which is single use, because the extent of resources, natural resources that go into it is really what is causing the damage to our planet. Yeah, so we need to respect nature and all that it gives us and be accountable for it, and that will take a toll on convenience. Yeah, but tomorrow,
Yes.
if we don't have clean air, water, and our oceans are full of plastic, think of the kind of inconvenience that we will, all of us, be putting ourselves through in our next several generations. Yeah, so there needs to be that change that takes place. Also on innovation, right now we have still plastic recycling, uh, big gaps in the kind of innovations around plastic recycling. I think on it, and maybe if anyone, if the audience wants to write back to us or get into the further details of, say, things like plastic to fuel and how we are seeing, we still are a long distance away from making such technologies work. Currently, these technologies for the last maybe 25 years are just in pilot phases. Yeah, the quality of the fuel that comes out, the use of the fuel is still long distance away from being the kind of mainstream solutions that we are looking for. So technology is important for sure, but technology cannot just be the overall overarching solution. It is an enabler. It needs to work along with nature and people. And technology, is cannot be just the standalone that will kind of be this solution which we can which we can all go after. Yeah, so there is a requirement for us to understand the limitations also of technology.
Thank you, ma'am. There's a question from Abhisha. So, as we all know, everything we buy is mainly in plastic material. What is the replacement material instead of plastic in the current industrial scenario? Is there any such material existing?
Yeah, so one of the things, I mean, plastic is about 50 years old, 60 years old, maybe a little older, but there you do have alternates. We have things in terms of packaging. There is glass, there is, other forms of packaging which is also there, but each of these solutions has its limitations. Yeah, so I would say that definitely packaging over glass, there's been a lot of comparison for in favor of plastic, in favor of even sometimes paper versus plastic. There's been a lot of discussions, but the best alternative solutions is to use it responsibly, to use as less of it as possible. We've seen packaging, unnecessarily packaging, coming into the system as a form of convenience. Right now, we've been looking at how perhaps reuse can be a much better alternative solution. And the best example for reuse as a solution I could give, say, for the food aggregators. So currently, the food aggregators, all of us, I don't, but many of perhaps the audience orders food and it comes packed in plastic. There is an alternative. We can have a reuse system. You bring your, the dabba system, which worked so well in Mumbai. Yeah, if it worked so well 20, 30 years ago, find an innovative way in which to bring it back, innovate around it, and look how we can, bring it back, wash our containers, and then reuse it again. So reuse and repair are the alternatives to mindless, consumption of these kind of packaging materials. Arun, I don't know if you want to add something here.
So you haven't unmuted.
Sorry about that. No, that's very well said, Wilma. I would give the same response as well. The fact that the choice is in our hands, the choice is in the consumer's hands to be able to responsibly use the packaging, reuse as much as we can, because plastic wasn't there 40 years back, and we had solutions back then. To be very honest, in terms of alternatives, the straightforward question is there are not so many alternatives, to be very honest. But then we can reduce, and again, coming back to the hierarchy of waste management, that's the solution, to be very honest.
Thank you, sir. Some people in the audience want to know more about Saahas and what activities you all do and your presence all over India.
Yeah, so Saahas Zero Waste is a social enterprise, and we have 3 verticals. Our first vertical is the Zero Waste program. So we work, say in Bangalore, we work with the Indian Institute of Management, and we manage all their waste end to end. I mean, apart from IAM, we work with a lot of corporate companies. And our benchmark is to enable all our customers manage and recover 96% of all the waste that they generate every day, whether it is organic waste or whether it is paper, plastic, metal, glass. That is the kind of potential that there is in waste management, when up to 96 to 98% of all our waste can be managed through proper collection, segregation, and processing and recycling. The second vertical is on extended producer responsibility, and that is where Arun, you want to take the second vertical, which is extended producer responsibility?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Wilma. So we've been pioneers in this field as well. We've been working with the likes of Tetra Pak and a lot of these corporate brands as well, who have a requirement by policy to be able to bring back their packaging into the supply chain and divert it from landfill. So we work very heavily with products like e-waste and plastic waste, and we were the countries, one of the top countries, PROs. It's called Producer Organization, where we engage with a lot of stakeholders, including the informal sector, and bring back plastic and e-waste from the sources back into a formal supply chain. Now that's very important. Very, very small percentage of the industry moves in the formal space, and we are enablers of that as well.
And the fourth vertical is on closing the loop, where we also sell products made from recycled materials. So, you have now plastic, Tetra Pak, paper, etc., which can be made into board, and this board can be an alternative to regular wood. You can have tiles made out of it, roofing materials made out of it. So we need to bring our waste back. And that is how we will close the loop. The better way to recycle plastic is to bring that plastic back into the same material. And the next lower down the line is to recycle it so that you have other products that can be reused for a long term. So we are part of one of the third verticals, is where we sell recycled products, where we sell compost, where we bring back waste so that it can be put back into functional use. So we manage today about 100 tons of waste per day across for our zero waste program. We are in Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Goa, mostly South India. We would love to also work in Mumbai and the cities in the north, but we unfortunately, I think some of the cities like Mumbai are not ready for us. I'm sorry to say this, but the reason is that our business model requires that we have a service fee so that we can give you that service offering of 96% resource recovery. So if we were to work with any of the campuses, there would be a revenue from a service fee and a revenue from the waste, and that would enable us to make sure that all our teams, including including our field staff who work with us as our own employees, would get paid minimum wages. All these years, you see the informal sector with not even access to minimum wages. And we need to make sure now that that kind of justice is done to people working with waste. Yesterday we celebrated Labor Day, and it is unfortunate that the labor laws very often that do not apply to people working with waste. We are one of the few organizations that make sure that the team at least gets paid minimum wages and access to social security. So that's a little bit about us. Do look at our website, Saahas Zero Waste. And if you would like us to work with you in Mumbai, do reach out. We'd be more than happy to come to Mumbai as well.
Yes, ma'am. Since I'm from Mumbai, I was just curious to know why Mumbai is not ready for Saahas yet.
Because they're not ready to pay a service fee, which is really, less than. I mean, these are really small amounts. But you need to understand that today waste management has evolved. Waste management has to be accepted as a professional service, like everything else. And when people understand that, then they will also put a lot of responsibility on organizations like us to deliver. And when I say deliver, we will deliver on 96% resource recovery. We will have much less waste going to a place like Deonar, which has had so many problems in the last 1 year. I know that you're in Mumbai, so I'm making these references. But the same kind of situation is in Noida, in NCR, in Delhi, and in Bangalore, where, our landfills are all really overfull and causing a lot of problems.
Thank you, ma'am. And one more question. How do investors view financing for social enterprises in these sectors compared to some other sectors?
Yeah, thanks for this question, because it's very important that today we see a lot of commitments made by venture capitalists who are saying that, look, we are not going to be investing in fossil fuel businesses or in big oil for that matter. So unfortunately, what we would like now is for venture capitalists to also act like proper impact investors and look at organizations like us who have impact as much as bottom line, top line, all those other typical business matrices. So when we go out to our investors, that's what we bring to the table. We say, don't just measure us by our top line, by our revenues, and by our profitability or our bottom line or the extent of our customers, but measure us by our social and environmental impact. This is coming in slowly, but too slowly. It has to really scale up. It has to be enhanced. We have a lot of also brand companies investing now in the social sector, but they still invest with the intention of maximum profitability. We would really want now that profitability, which is not bad, but it cannot be the only reason for investment. The better reason would be to invest so that social and environmental impact is equally taken into consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. That was my last question. So if anyone in the audience has any questions, you all can ask them through the chat. We have a question from Nirmala. What do you think of these recycled materials like boards or tiles? In the long run, will they not fragment into microplastics and enter our food or water cycles?
Yes, that's exactly why we are saying closed loop recycling, because that is what we have to aspire towards, and that is what we have to push our brands to. This solution of boards versus tiles, etc., can be an interim solution. We are also, as an organization, sincerely reviewing also the t-shirts made from PET. Yeah, because that again so microplastics is something that we have to recognize as a future problem, if not already a present problem. And we really have to push for closed loop recycling so that there will be no remnants of any kind of residue of plastic.
Thank you, ma'am. There are a few questions from Anupam. Can we as individuals invest in a company like yours? And do you work with housing societies?
Yeah, so individuals definitely support our NGO Saahas. The NGO Saahas, you can look at their website. They do a lot of good work in smaller towns, smaller cities, rural India. So as an NGO, they could definitely take donations. You as individuals or even residential communities can become our customer. Yeah, so we would be more than happy to work with residential communities as well. And as our customer, we would give you the best service. We would be accountable to all the waste that you generate and work with you as partners. We need more customers, and we need customers who will then push us to do the work that we do best. 96% resource recovery.
Thank you, ma'am. The last two questions for the day. So Amal is asking how to compete with big companies. Actually, I didn't get your question, Amal. Please, can you elaborate on that? Meanwhile, Santosh is asking that we heard of plastic being used in road making. Is this one of the options to recycle?
It's one of the options. Arun, you want to take this on road making?
Yeah, sure. It is one of the options. To be very honest, it's an option for non-recyclable plastic as well, where plastic forms a coating around the stones, the jelly stones, and that becomes a good binder of the asphalt. The government has come up with recommendations and have promoted usage, especially in rural areas for road infrastructure. We are assessing this internally. We have approached industry experts, and we have got the green signal for it. We have not implemented it ourselves, but definitely it is an option. There are lots of questions around and microplastics, etc. To be very honest, we haven't seen signs of it technically, and we have approached the best industry standards for these for a review on road laying. But yeah, it does remain an option. But I think we touched upon this earlier as well. Wilma mentioned about the choice in terms of technologies. There is plastic to fuel, and there are lots of these other options. In fact, there is something new coming up called chemical recycling. Like Wilma, isn't one solution which has got scale, and right now we need solutions which can address scale of plastic in recycling. Road laying is a very small portion of the plastic that can actually be used. There are multiple factors there in terms of policies around road laying, so the contractors will actually lay proper roads using plastic. There's also this issue around what happens during monsoons and rainy seasons. The plastic is just going to get piled up. So there are lots of issues. The best solution around plastic in terms of recycling and choice of technology is obviously closed loop recycling, where plastic becomes plastic once again. It's called mechanical recycling, where plastic is made into pellets. That's probably the best choice right now. But yes, you do have other options. And we touched upon this other technology where you make boards through something called reprocessing of plastic, where you actually don't melt it, you don't change the chemical composition, you shred it, and you probably hot press it to make a repurposed product out of plastic. So that also could be a good option at the moment.
Thank you. So do you all have some final messages to the audience and in general to the youth of our country?
Yeah, I can just quickly, give my sort of final slide. This is the solution. Okay. So in terms of the problem statements that we've put out there, we need a very collaborative, adaptive waste management solution, which leverages technology as well, which is just an enabler, like we mentioned earlier. But then we need to be able to match the supply and the demand requirements. And holistic collection and sorting mechanism, not too much investments is coming into this space at the moment. A lot of investments are going into the technology of recycling, as we call it, downcycling, unfortunately. But a lot more infrastructure development, entrepreneurial development, a lot more people have to, people are required to be moved into the space of holistic collection and sorting mechanism. And finally, like we all said, recycling is coming up, but then there is a huge opportunity there as well. So this was the concluding remarks from my side from a technical perspective.
From my side, I would say reduce, reuse, and continue to see how we can change lifestyles so that becomes the message both to government as well as to industry and to ourselves.
Thank you so much for joining us, Wilma ma'am and Arun sir. It was a really insightful and stimulating discussion for all of us. And I'm sure each one of us will henceforth take the responsibility for our own waste, see waste as a resource, and work on more collaborative solutions. Thank you so much, everyone, for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you once again, everyone, for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and hope to stay in touch. Bye.
Yes, same here, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
you.
Bye.